Alright, so last time I did a PvE Bloodline Tier List was actually over 4 months ago. So in this video, I'm bringing you guys the new PvE Bloodline Tier List. So if you guys enjoyed this video, let's just right to the video, guys. Alright, so I just preemptively put all of the trash farming Bloodlines in the actual bottom of this, just because, you know, there's no point in wasting your guys' time. If you guys enjoyed me not wasting your time, hit that like button already. What are you doing? Alright, so we're going to be starting off this. I'm not really going to be going into detail about these. I'm either going to be just saying, you know, the most simple thing about them, why they're actually good for farming, you know, the main ability that you're actually going to be using. Alright, so Akuma, it's actually just going to be the mode, the sixth mode. I'm gonna put this in use if nothing else. The sixth mode does around 90,000 damage to someone if you actually hit the C-spec onto the boss, and it does actually work on bosses, so you know that's a pretty large damage burst. Not to mention the fact that the actual abilities themselves are really good for boss farming, because you can either just avoid damage or just do a bit of damage to the boss overall. Go to Jokai. Now Urahaki Jokai is actually going to be better than average. I think the first ability is an extremely good boss farming, especially for tail beasts. The first ability is really good just because, you know, since bosses don't get knocked back, it actually does quite a bit of damage to people, and tail beasts, they take more than average damage from the ability. Now Bankai Akuma is going to be an avoid if possible, which is actually kind of funny considering Bankai Akuma. It's mainly just going to be for the third ability, but you know, it's not the worst thing in the world. Now Black Shock's going to be another use if nothing else one, but I'm actually going to be putting it above Akuma just because Black Shock has more damage output than the other, you know, than Akuma. Boramaki is going to be another better than average. It's actually at the top of better than average. You know, Boramaki has the first and third ability, which are really good, just high damage abilities. Not to the fact that the actual mode itself can be useful because the stats on are actually pretty good. Bubble's going to be another use if nothing else one because the boss normally doesn't stay in the same spot, but you know, you can actually use it in some different scenarios. Like if the boss is down, you can do some damage to it, I guess. Clay is going to be another avoid if possible one. I do feel like it just kind of stalls out the boss fight more than actually just helping overall, so yeah, that's my personal opinion on Clay. Cobra's going to be another use if nothing else, probably at the bottom of use if nothing else, because I do feel like Cobra just really isn't that great for farming in general. Dangan is going to be another use if nothing else one, just because Dangan doesn't really have that much damage output, but I do feel like the range on it can be useful in different scenarios, so that it's going to be going below Akuma if using nothing else. Diva Red is going to be another avoid if possible, because avoid if possible, Diva Red, you know, obviously not that great for PvP, probably not that great for boss farming either. That's usually how it goes. Dioseko, now this was going to be another better if average, probably at the bottom, because the second mode specifically, Dioseko, is really good for boss farming, just because it has super raw damage output. Emerald is going to be another better than average. This is actually very surprising because it actually is an EKG, but the third ability of, the second ability of Emerald, the trap ability, is really good for boss farming, because if you actually use the ability of the boss as the boss is coming towards you, it will do a lot of damage to the boss. Explosion is going to be another use if nothing else, because the second ability, that's going to be the only reason why. Alright, so on to Forge Red here. Forge Red is going to be another better if average. I'm actually putting Forge Red near the top of better than average, just because the mode has super high damage output. And that's for the fact that the actual abilities of Forge Red themselves are actually pretty good in a lot of different scenarios when it comes to farming in this game. Now, Scorch or Frostfire are going to be going in the exact same spot, but Scorch will obviously go above it. Now, I'm going to be putting Scorch or Frostfire, if used and nothing else, probably around right here, because they actually do have quite a bit of damage output, but I do feel like there's just better in this game. And also, Dioseko is going to be moving down to use if nothing else. Giovanni Shizen, now this is going to be the first one in best farm. No, alright. It's going to be at the top and better than average, just because the C-spec, the second mode C-spec, is really good. It has such large damage output, and it works really well on bosses. Now, I'm actually going to be putting Raika Shizen and Shizen right next to Giovanni Shizen, just because I do feel like if it fills the same purpose, the second mode specifically of these Bloodlines actually do a lot of damage to bosses if they're standing still. And you also want to get really close to the boss to do the max amount of damage that you can. The actual abilities of these Bloodlines are really the greatest for boss farming, but the modes are amazing. Now, Hair is going to be another avoid if possible, probably at the top avoid if possible. I mean, just really not that much damage output. Wanzayame, another avoid if possible, probably actually near the bottom of it, just because Wanzayame just really isn't that great for boss farming. I'm actually just going to go ahead and put the Bloodlines in avoid if possible, just to not waste your guys' time, just because these ones I feel like are very straightforward as well. Alright, so I went ahead and just put these Bloodlines in avoid if possible. Now, there's actually some really rare ones here, but you guys got to remember that PvP, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be good in PvE. It's just generally the more damage a Bloodline does, the higher up in the list it'll be. Now, Ink. Ink is going to be another use if nothing else. I'm actually going to put Ink probably above Dioseko. Has pretty good damage output overall. That's why it's not going to be in the, you know, the lower tiers. Apollo Sand is going to be another better than average. I'm putting Apollo Sand at the very top of better than average. I'm actually putting Apollo Sand in best farming Bloodline. I mean, it's going to be one of the best farming Bloodlines because the C-spec actually does stack on bosses. It actually works really well if the boss is coming towards you. The third ability does the exact same thing. Not for the fact that the other abilities of Apollo Sand are actually okay for boss farming. And the actual M1s themselves are really good as well. Kaijin is going to be another best farming Bloodline. It's actually going to be above Apollo Sand. Kaijin's second ability, it's literally just a Xenodokai C-spec, but on an elemental slot. That's for the fact that the actual monkey can help you in boss fighting because the monkey will distract the boss. Kamaki's gonna be another better than average Kamaki at the very bottom. The C-spec doesn't really work the same as it used to. That's why it's not as high up anymore, but it still does a decent amount of damage. Karada's gonna be another better than average Karada, probably below Boramaki, above Goto Jokai. Karada just has absolutely massive damage output, hence why it's going to be better than average. Kenichi's going to be another use if nothing else. Actually, this is going to be another avoid if possible. I don't know why I didn't put this down here, I guess. Same thing with Kancho. Alright, so for Lava, Lava's going to be a better than average. I do think Lava is actually pretty good for boss farming now, just because the damage output that Lava has is really, really good, especially with the actual Lava Wave. If the boss walks through it, it will do a lot of damage to the boss. Now, Light Jokai is kind of a special case, but it is going to be at the very bottom of better than average, just because, no, actually, I'll put it in use if nothing else at the very top. And same thing with Kamaki, but when it comes to actually Light Jokai does have some, benefits. The first ability is pretty good. The second ability can be used on bosses like the counter ability, and the actual third ability can do quite a bit of damage to bosses. Minakaze is going to be another use if nothing else, because Minakaze's second ability is actually really, really good for bosses, because it actually does work on bosses unlike players. But the actual other abilities of Minakaze, they can be useful in some different scenarios, but overall they're just really not that great. Now Naramaki is going to be a better than average. Now this one may surprise some people, but I have actually realized that Naramaki is really, really good for boss grinding. Naramaki in all senses of the word just has absolutely massive damage output, and the reason why it's not really that great for PvP is just because it has so much delay with the abilities. You can't really throw them into combos, and counters are meta right now, so yeah. But it is really good for farming because of that damage output. Now, Nectar's going to be another better than average. Now, Nectar's going to be going above Naramaki, below Naramaki. That's not Naramaki, that's not Nectar, that's Shadow. My bad. But Nectar, I actually do feel like it's a pretty good bloodline overall, just because Nectar does have that absolutely massive damage output, and it does work on bosses. Shadow's gonna be another best farming bloodline at the very bottom, because the only good thing about Shadow for farming is the C-spec, but if you land that C-spec on a boss, half the health or more of the boss will be done immediately, and I'm not even lying when I say that. Now, Paper's going to be another better than average bloodline, because I actually do feel like Paper does have quite a bit of damage output, especially compared to the other bloodlines. So I'm actually putting Paper probably below Boramaki, above Karada. Atomic's going to be another use if nothing else, probably actually near the top just because that does have a decent amount of damage. Pikaseko, another use if nothing else bloodline, probably honestly above Dioseko, just because Pikaseko itself, it's really not that great for boss farming, but there's definitely a lot worse. Alright, so for Vine's going to be another use if nothing else, because I do feel like the clones of Vine are actually pretty good for boss farming, and that's the main reason why. Ryan Ren has that second mode, so it's going to be going in better than average, probably at the very bottom. No, I'm actually going to be moving it up. That second mode is pretty good for boss farming, and the second move can actually move bosses, so that's pretty cool. Rengoku's going to be another better than average for boss farming, probably at the very bottom of better than average. Actually, no, I'll put it above Goto Jokai just because of the mode itself. Now, Raiju Kenichi is going to be a use if nothing else bloodline, because I do feel like Raiju Kenichi doesn't really have the damage output, but the second ability is pretty good for boss farming. Sand is going to be another use if nothing else. It's mainly just going to be for the Z spec itself. Satori Kuma is going to be a better than average just because of the weapon spec. It's on a pretty good... No, it's going to be unused if nothing else. I think that's actually a better spot for it. The weapon spec of the mode is actually quite good for boss farming. Now, Sengoku's going to be a use if nothing else, because I do feel like Sengoku, while it does have a lot of damage output, the abilities are hard to land on bosses sometimes. Shindai Ren is going to be another best farming bloodline just because Shindai Ren does have the second mode, which actually is really good for just M1 wise. Not just the fact that the first ability is pretty good, the third ability actually hits bosses as well, and Shindai Ren just has a lot of damage output overall. Shindai Kuma is going to be in better than, probably use if nothing else actually at the very top. No, I'll put it in better than average. I'll move Goto Jokai down, actually. I think this is actually a better spot for Shindai. It just has pretty good damage output overall. Smoke. By the way, guys, what is your favorite PvE farming bloodline in the entire game? What is just your go-to bloodline for farming bosses in the game? For your type of comments below, we'll actually be checking them out. Alright, so I retroactively just put in another tier called Best Traveling Moves, and Pikaseko and Smoke are going to be going in there. I actually feel like Pikaseko and Smoke are almost a necessity for boss farming, just because you have to actually get around the map, and these will actually help you do that very, very well. I'll be putting that just at the very bottom, just so it stands out to people. Now, Sound's going to be another better than average, just because it had, large damage output as the other ones. Tengoku's exact same thing, just large damage output overall. you know, I'm probably going to be putting it below Ryan Ren. Now, Tsunami is going to be another best farming bloodline, probably above Shindai Ren. Now, Tsunami, actually, all of the abilities, you can just spam them on bosses. It actually will do a lot of damage to bosses. Typhoon, another best farming bloodline at the very bottom. Actually, I do feel like Typhoon's second, just because of Typhoon's second, I'm actually going to be putting it near the top of best farming bloodline, like in the very middle. But Typhoon's second is really, really good for boss farming right now. If you guys don't believe me, just check it out. Now, with Xenodokai, let's be real here. It is the best farming bloodline in the entire game. The C-Spec just does tons of damage to bosses, and that's literally it when it comes to Xenodokai. Alfurama Shizen. Now, Alfurama Shizen is going to be a probably a better than average at the very top. I do feel like Alfurama Shizen is kind of beat out by the other bloodlines of the game just because the mode drains so much. Nokutogoku is going to be an avoid if possible. I forgot to put it there, honestly. Satori Ren, another avoid if possible. Forgot to put it there. Now, Shiro Glacier, I actually feel like Shiro Glacier is quite a good boss farming bloodline, so I'm actually going to be putting it better than average, probably above Sound, just because the damage output of Shiro Glacier itself is actually quite a lot. Now, Kagoku. Kagoku is another, you know, I feel like if it's another use if nothing else, that's a joke, by the way, guys. Kagoku, the actual M1s of the actual mode are amazing for boss farming. So if you guys have actually not used Kagoku mode M1s are really, really good. Six Path Naramaki is going to be a use if nothing else. No, okay, that's a joke. It's definitely top and better than average. I actually feel like Six Path Naramaki, the final mode of it is a very, very high damage dealing mode. But other than that, it really doesn't have much going for it. Ryan Gaiden, I actually feel like this one's going to be in better than average. Probably right next to Rengoku. Actually put it above Lava. I feel like Ryan Gaiden has a lot of damage output, and the second ability is really good for just stalling out boss fights. Now, Rune Kancho. Now, Rune Kancho is going to be going into probably better than average. Rune Kancho, the one thing it does actually have going for it is that it is really, really good for boss farming. So I'm actually going to be putting it above Alfurama Shizen. Now, Strange. Strange is really, really good at PvP, but I actually do not feel like it's a very good boss farming bloodline at all. So I'm actually going to be putting it better than average. Probably, honestly, I'm actually going to be putting it at the very bottom just because the damage output really isn't that great, but it still is decent. Also, Bruce Kenichi. Bruce Kenichi is pretty bad for boss farming overall. I would recommend just not using it at all because it doesn't even work on the boss. Anyways, guys, this video. Guys, enjoyed this video. Thanks for guys. Bye-bye.